Hey, welcome to the Live Well presented by RAPALA. That is Ronnie Moore. I'm Tommy Sanders, and the first two events on the Bassmaster Elite Series for 2024 are in the books, in many cases rewriting parts of the books, but that's another story. The big story now, all eyes on the World Championships, the Bass Pro Shops Bassmaster Classic, presented by Jockey Outdoors, 54th edition coming up. Right?
Yeah, 56 anglers for this 54th Bassmaster Classic. You can't win the Classic, Tommy, if you're not in it, so we know the long Elite Series season last year, how competitive it was. Yeah. Down to the final day, the final hours of fishing, that weigh-in, there was a lot of people counting up points. Did I get in and make the Classic? Because this is what you work your whole year for. A lot of anglers have worked their whole lives to get to the Elite Series, to have an opportunity to make the Bassmaster Classic. There are a lot of amateurs that have made their ways through the Nation, the Team, the College Series, and the Opens. You got to get to the Classic to experience it at least one time. The curtains pulling apart, them announcing your name, your fans, your friends, your family cheering in the stands. It's all meshed into 1 week, and it's something that really will take your breath away.
And it will change your life should you win the Classic. It's important on so many levels. It's so far ahead of anything else. It's unbelievable. As you say, the third time for Grand Lake.
We came into the shot with Jeff Gustafson's jersey hanging on the wall there. Our reigning and defending Classic champion, second international angler ever. Gussie really didn't have words for what the Classic meant for him, because it's one of those things that it's a lifelong dream, but it is an adrenaline emotional dump. At that final day, you're still keyed up, high energy. You lose all your energy on that final day, and you kind of just, man, I did it. What else is there to do in fishing? But we know, obviously, there's a goal to go back-to-back. Gussie would love to do that at Grand Lake. He's roommates with the local favorite, Jason Christie. That may help him, may hurt him, who knows. But, yes, like you said, third time here at the Classic at Grand Lake. Because remember, in 2013, we were still starting our Bassmaster season with the Classic. 2016, it became, you know, the second or third event of our year, so it was pushed back a little bit. But that first one, it was much farther ahead in the calendar than where we are now.
Oh, absolutely. And 36-degree water, I think, to start on the first day. Warmed up a little, but a great story. I mean, Cliff Pace sort of stuck to his guns, didn't do a lot of running around. He had to fend off guys like Mike Iaconelli, and later Brandon Palaniuk and Hank Cherry, who had a shot on the final day and fell just a little bit short, sticking to his guns. Cliff Pace won it in 2013. Different story in 2016.
Yeah, well, and when we think about that 2013 event, you were talking about all the names of the anglers. Who would have thought maybe in 2013 that list of anglers would become what it is now? An unknown Hank Cherry go on to win 2 Classics back-to-back. Brandon Palaniuk was in his second or third year of exposure with Bassmaster. We knew potential. We didn't know how many wins he has received in the last few years from that. Mike Iaconelli, legend already in the sport, but tied after day one with Cliff Pace. We even have to throw in a Jason Christie.
Absolutely.
Really unknown to the Bassmaster. He fished FLW, came over, and it was his debut for the Bassmaster Classic and the future Elite Series, and we knew he'd be in it to win it. Transitioning to 2016, we got to see much more of a spring vibe. It seemed early in practice, at least in practice, it was colder. It was colder on day one, and then it started to warm up. We knew that it wasn't going to be frigid for long, and those fish may start to change. And we saw Edwin Evers do 3 parts of Grand Lake. And when we look at Grand Lake and how it is set up from end to end, the Neosho, like you said, and the spring and the elk that come in, all of these creeks make the north part of this lake much more riverish. It's much flatter, a different type of body of water. But we saw Edwin on day one make a run to the bottom of the lake. That's more stable. You know, the bluff banks at times, dock fishing, you can get into a creek, but much deeper overall everywhere you go. There's access to deep water close by. We saw him mid-pack, not doing too great, but not far behind. He makes an adjustment, goes up river, catches a good bag, is in contention. And then on that final day, the Elk River came into play, and it was one that the elk is very hard to unlock, Tommy. It seems like people can go in there and be around the winning fish, can see the winning fish, but can't catch them. He ends up going in there, perfect amount of wind, wins the tournament, and obviously had one of the biggest Classic bags we've ever seen, upper 20s, to be able to come back and win that. But I feel like as we transition into the 2024 Classic, with it being a couple weeks later, how many weeks later than the other Classics?
Well, it's 3 weeks later than 2016, 4 weeks later than 2013. It's going to be a different weather outlook, we predict.
Basically a full month difference for those other 2 Classics to here. You're going to see a lot more of these flat pockets and these banks where the depth is much different. When we talked about down the lake, it's a lot of contour lines that are really close. When you get to mid-lake, you've got the access to deep water right there. The main channel's not far, a couple hundred yards off the bank, but you really do get that 6 to 10 foot, 6 to 15 foot range, spread out pretty far. We're way out in the middle of the lake, and there's still very fishable water for this time of the year. And then when you think about up the river a little bit more, some of these backs of these creeks will start to factor with spawning fish. I don't know the last time we've seen maybe a spawner get caught in the Bassmaster Classic that helped somebody win the tournament. Hartwell was on the verge of doing that. And I don't know how much this bottom part of the lake will factor. Much more stable conditions for the water. But we could see, if you see someone weigh in big pre-spawners, Tommy, you may have an indication they're probably down the lake because that's where it's going to be. But when you do look at that, and I want to pull up real quick to be able to circle for the fans at home, when we're kind of classifying this lake, this would be what we call up lake. You know, this is the Neosho. You know, the elk's going to come in just below that. And then when we go to the mid lake, you're going to have part of the elk, probably wolf down to Shangri-La. And then when you get down to the bottom part of the lake, that's going to be, you know, Drowning Creek, all of those different creeks down at the bottom that have shallow water, but predominantly will hold a lot more pre-spawn and deeper water conditions for these fish.
A couple of other things about Grand Lake, traditionally not known for submerged vegetation. Usually that's not the case. They're also known as one of the greatest pattern lakes that you can find anywhere. How is that going to affect the techniques, the baits we're going to see?
I think that that's one thing that you're going to manage. We're going to see guys do what Edwin maybe did in the 2016 Classic, where they may hop around to a couple different portions, because Tommy, on day one, I could be in here catching sight fish and I just stop seeing fish roll up on bed. I realize I've either need to go south, where they're maybe behind in their progression and they're about to start spawning, and try to catch them as they make their way there. Or if I want to fish more of maybe a post-spawn fish that are off the bed and they're just feeding up, maybe I go north to the shallower. So you're going to see that those patterns change, and maybe somebody stays in a region of a lake and they start out on the main lake and then they work their way into the backs of creeks, or they may have to relocate completely on the lake.
It's not a big part of our job to get into favorites as we go into this, but at the time it was announced as a classic venue, we might have leaned toward names, of course, like Jason Christie, which we still do, as one of the favorites here. Palaniuk, Cherry, but now what's to stop you from saying, how about the last two winners on the Bassmaster Elite Series?
Yeah, some of the rookies from last season, Joey Cifuentes, Kiyoya Fujita, those Cooper Gallant, those will be people we need to consider, especially because guys like Fujita, guys like Cooper Gallant got up to great starts this year. When you think about other people who've won the Classic, you mentioned it, we've got all three of our most recent Classic winners in the Classic. Gussie, the defending champ, Christie, the local favorite, Cherry looking for revenge and his third Classic there. There's a lot of options to choose from there. I think that we will see live scope and forward-facing sonar play a factor. It always will, but when we get towards the spawn, you're gonna have to now seek it out, not all over the lake. You're gonna have to find the portion of the lake where the fish are doing that. It may be in the middle of a ditch of a creek, but it's not going to be every creek. It might be just certain parts of the lake. You're going to have to seek that out. I'm going to rely and lean on the guys who maybe dabble in both. The guys who are good enough to do it just fishing style, maybe sight fishing, maybe flipping docks with a jig, maybe rolling a spinnerbait around, or if they need to go out and use a jerkbait on forward-facing sonar or some jig head minnow techniques. I'm going to throw out a name that was hot at Fork, Stetson Blaylock. He managed that very well to a top 10 finish, from fishing on day one to adjusting after day two to getting back and succeeding on day 3 and 4. I think that Stetson's been my classic pick for a long time because he knows this part of the country, and I think he really is one who has done a good job at balancing both styles of fishing. And I think there's a handful of other anglers who have done that too. It's not just Blaylock, but when you look down the AOY list, there's been some guys who have put two good events together that have managed fishing and obviously live scoping or forward-facing sonar off the bank.
Yeah, and Stetson always arrives at that sort of hard to define thing, ready to go, ready to fire at classics. That's another thing to figure in when you talk about him. But pick your own favorite. Hey,
I'll throw out two more underdogs.
Okay.
Matt Airy. He's done really well in March, April. I think every week of April he's fished a semi-pro or a pro-level event and has had success late March through April. He's going to be one, especially with how warm it's going to be getting. The temperature's trending in a positive, stable condition. Also, Kenta Kimura. I know that Luke Palmer and Jason Christie are going to be the local favorites, but when Kenta's not in Japan, he puts his roots down, not on a Bassmaster tournament stage because he's there a lot, but in Oklahoma at Grand Lake. That's his home. I think Kenta's also a great fisherman and technology guy mixed in. So there's three guys, Stetson, Airy, and Kenta, who can do it both.
Get all your favorites lined up. Full coverage right here on Bassmaster.com. Also, of course, on FS1 and the Fox Network. March 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, the Bass Pro Shops Bassmaster Classic presented by Jockey Outdoors.